I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The board will now adjourn into executive session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Texas Government Code Section 551.071, private consultation with the board's attorney. 551.072, discussing purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. 551.074, to discuss personnel or to hear complaints against personnel. And 551.076, to discuss security personnel pursuant to security personnel. And the time is 5:01. The board will now reconvene into open session, and the time is 6:45. On behalf of the trustees, I would like to welcome you to this evening's meeting of the Northeast Independent School Board. This is a business meeting of the board held in public. We appreciate your attendance and request your respectful attention. We welcome your comments during the matters from the floor section of the agenda. If you signed up to address a specific action agenda item, you will be called at that time. We wish to emphasize that this is a business meeting of the board, and while those in attendance may disagree about issues, it is our expectation that everyone will conduct themselves in a respectful and professional manner. Disruptions to this meeting by anyone will not be tolerated. Sorry. In the event any person or group disrupts the meeting, a warning will be given to stop any disruptive behavior. Anyone persisting in disruptive behavior will be removed from the meeting. The board may also call a recess in the event of persistent disruptions so that individuals who engage in disruptions can be removed. It is our intent to conduct the meeting in an orderly fashion. Finally, I would like to remind you that it is the mission of Northeast to challenge and encourage each student to achieve and demonstrate academic excellence, technical skills, and responsible citizenship. And I apologize, but as some of you may know, we lost our board member, Terry Williams, yesterday. She was very committed to our community and the students of Northeast. She's been on the board since 2018 and most recently served as the vice president of the board. She had a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we will miss her wonderful sense of humor and common sense approach. We would like to extend our deepest sympathies to her husband and her boys and her family and friends and everyone that loved her. So if I could please ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. Item 5, Invocation and Pledge of Allegiance. Miss Carroll from Castle Hills Elementary.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Micah in absentia, Mr. Jimenez, executive staff, and guests. My name is Corey Carroll, and I'm the proud principal of Castle Hills Elementary, a Leader in Me Lighthouse Honor Roll campus. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce to you two of our finest fifth grade leaders. Both of these students were chosen because of the leadership qualities they exhibit both in the classroom and the various organizations and clubs they participate in. Providing the invocation tonight is Berlin Cash. Joining her tonight are her parents, Brian and Stephanie Cash, grandparents Anthony and Sophia Garcia, and grandmother Elizabeth Jimenez. Would you please stand and be recognized? Leading the Pledge of Allegiance and the Pledge the Texas flag is Xavier Barba. Joining him tonight is his parents Charles and Maria Barba, big sisters Clarissa here in person, and sister Miriam who is watching online. Would you please stand and be recognized? At this time, I will ask Berlin to come to the podium for the invocation, followed by Xavier with the pledges.
Albert Einstein once said, "Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile." I believe that as we go into our school year, we should apply this statement to our everyday lives, because when we do this, we are not only caring for other people, we are caring for ourselves. My hope is that kids have a fun and engaging school year while also learning as much as they can concerning the world around them. Now, please stand. I invite you to bow your heads. As we go into this next school year, we begin a new chapter in our lives. Allow us to grow in our understanding of ourselves and each other. Help the teachers to have the knowledge to guide the students in daily learning and creativity. Enable our school leaders to be able to solve problems proactively with love and clear understanding. Give our school board the wisdom to make decisions that benefit the well-being of our students, staff, and families. Please help us all to gain new perspectives and valuable experiences. Amen. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Xavier and Berlin, if you would come forward, we'd like to take your picture, and we have some certificates, and Ms. Villarreal and Mr. Jimenez will come for pictures. That was a beautiful inspiration. Thank you so much. You did a great job on that. Thank y'all for being here. You're welcome to go because I know y'all have school. But thank you again for being here. Item 6, recognitions. I would like to let you all know that Dr. Micah and Mr. Jarrett are in D.C., and they have been invited to the White House for a back-to-school safely cybersecurity for K through 12 schools. So that is why Dr. Micah is not here this evening, and that's why Mr. Jimenez is sitting in his place. And then our first day of school is next Monday for the rest of the campuses, August 14th. So it's here. Item 7, matters from the floor. The trustees welcome comments from members of the public during this time of the meeting. Generally, board members do not respond to public comments during the meeting, although members may request further information or a future agenda item on a matter raised during public comment. As explained fully in the board's written procedures for this time, the matters from the floor portion is a limited public forum. Accordingly, speakers may present on a topic related to district business for up to 3 minutes, but are not permitted to make 1, personal complaints about an individual staff or board member that should be raised using the district's grievance policies, 2, a personnel action, 3, a student disciplinary matter, 4, a complaint about a particular student, 5, or pending litigation. Any person who persists in speaking on these topics after being directed not to do so will lose the remainder of their time to speak and may lose their privilege of addressing the board at future meetings. If you signed up to speak on a specific agenda item, you will be called up when the board reaches that item. Please remember that this is a business meeting of the board. Any person or group engaging in outbursts of any kind causing a disruption to the meeting will be warned, and if they persist, will be removed from the meeting. This is to ensure that all speakers have an opportunity to make comments without interruption and that the board members are able to pay full attention to speakers without any distractions. We also welcome written comments at any time, either through email at board@neisd.net or by mail care of the Superintendent's Office at 8961 Tesoro Drive, 6th floor, San Antonio, Texas, 78217. Ms. Huey.
Number 1.
Good evening. My name is Tim Taylor. I'd spoken to you all back at the June meeting about the need to approve chaplains in the school district in accordance with Texas Senate Bill 763. That bill allowed for the use of chaplains in public schools, but required the approval of each school district to implement them in their respective school districts. I'm speaking tonight to make further comments in that regard and encourage the board to approve chaplains in the Northeast School District. I would like to point out that chaplains are a vital and integral part of all of our society. We have chaplains in our prisons, jails, and detention centers. We also have them in all of our military branches, both in the United States and in our overseas bases. Our hospitals, nursing homes, and mental health facilities also staff chaplains to assist them. Most all of the sports teams have chaplains as well. Even many businesses and corporations have chaplains on their staff. Both our national and state Congress have chaplains that are a part of their program. Even local government bodies have chaplains available to them. Our police and law enforcement offices also have chaplains that work with them to assist them. There are even chaplains in various state parks throughout the nation. All of these organizations see the benefit, value, and help that chaplains bring to their particular environment. It is now time to allow chaplains to offer the same type services and programs for our schools, students, and teachers in our education system. Texas Senate Bill 763 has recently made provision for this to allow chaplains in our schools. It is now time to take action and approve the use of chaplains in the Northeast School District. We need to be the leader in this area so we can influence other school districts in Texas to also be safe, secure, productive, and mentally healthy. Vote to approve the use of chaplains in NEISD. This action will be one of the most positive things you can do as a school board to improve the culture and life of our schools. Thank you for listening and taking the steps necessary to provide for the use of chaplains in our schools.
Number 2.
Good evening, all. I'm going to speak from my heart. I didn't prepare ahead of time. This was kind of short notice, what I wanted to speak to y'all about, but,
Please state your name.
oh, I'm sorry. My name is Allison Schultz-Hamby.
Thank you.
My apologies.
Thank you.
First off, I want to start off with, I understand NEISD is a school district of 75-plus schools. You have well over 60,000 students in the district, over 4,000 teachers, and many more staff and administrators. As a parent, school safety is number one on my mind. Education is high, but safety is number one. When I send my child to school, I expect her to be safe and come back home the same way she left. I understand if it hasn't been already presented to the board, it will be about rotating police officers amongst the schools. I highly disagree with this, as police officers build relationships with the students. They know who to keep an eye on, who belongs on this campus. Regardless if you have fences around the campus, that's not going to keep people off. People still get on your campus daily. Whether they come on with weapons, because I've known they've been caught with weapons on campuses, and they don't belong there. When that's found, that's putting my child's life in jeopardy. Keeping the same officer on campus is the thing that needs to happen. They know who belongs on the campus and who doesn't. Rotating them, they will not know who is not supposed to be there and who is. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Number 3.
Good evening, members of the board, executive staff. My name is David Anderson, and I am the Vice President of the Northeast Education Association. On behalf of our members, I would like to welcome everyone to the new school year. We are looking forward to working together in making this district a great place to learn for all our children. We are partners in this endeavor, and we embrace the opportunity to collaborate closely with you and achieve our common goal, providing the best education possible. Our union members are passionate about their craft. They are eager to work hand in hand with the board to ensure that every child receives the support they need to thrive academically and emotionally. And on a side note, I would like to say we also want to echo our sympathies for the Williams family. She was a great advocate for this district and for public education. Thank you.
Number 4.
President Groen, excuse me, members of the board. My name is Tom Cummins, and I'm representing Northeast AFT. We would like to say a few words about the passing of Miss Williams. We were shocked, as everybody else was, about her passing. She was a friend, and she was a friend of all. Northeast AFT would like to express its condolences to the family of Ms. Williams. We supported her in her elections to the Northeast Board of Trustees, as she supported the students and employees of the district. She also brought her skills and knowledge to the board, as you acknowledged. More importantly, it was her character that really made her stand out. She was a model for all. Our community will miss her presence, but hopefully the legacy she has given us will continue through those she has touched in our community. Thank you.
Number 5.
Is there a number 6? Can I go after number 6? Oh, okay. All right. President Grona, members of the board, Mr. Jimenez, and executive staff. I'm Patsy Esterline, president of the Northeast AFT. As you know, there is a shortage of teachers willing to work for pay not commensurate with their responsibilities and working conditions that are frequently unsustainable. This has been true not only in Northeast, but throughout Texas, even though there are at least 200,000 Texans with teacher certifications who choose not to teach. You have addressed the pay to some extent this summer, even though you had to pass a deficit budget to do so, since the state's political leaders did not do their job. You also addressed the issue we brought as a school board grievance, the recruitment and retention pay of special ed teachers. You approved a $2,500 stipend for ALE teachers and redirection teachers. But will a shortage of special ed co-teachers continue as their recruitment and retention incentives were not addressed? Besides pay, there is another issue causing a lack of teachers willing to teach: unreasonable working conditions. One example in NEISD was the extension of the workday a few years ago to 8.5 hours without teachers being able to use their professional discretion as to the use of that time. Oftentimes, instead of being able to utilize the additional time for planning and preparing effective lessons or grading, the time was filled up with administrative activities and/or excessive and ineffective meetings. During this school year, Northeast AFT, in collaboration with our state organization, Texas AFT, will be tracking the working conditions which negatively affect the teacher's job. We will report back to you what we discover and propose solutions. It must be emphasized emphatically that a teacher's working conditions are the student's learning conditions. We ask you to work with us this year to improve the working conditions. All of you have friends, family, acquaintances who are teachers and will speak freely with you. Ask them about the workday of the teachers on their campus. Then let's work together to make the adjustments that are necessary so teachers will have a good work-life balance. Thank you.
Item 8, matters from executive session. A, personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments pursuant to Government Code Section 551.074. 1, possible action regarding routine personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments. Do I have a motion to approve A through E as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 2, possible action regarding proposed recommendation for termination of Chapter 21 term contract employee. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item B, possible action on resolution of Dietz versus NEISD State Court Vehicle Accident Litigation. Do I have a motion to approve the settlement as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 9, superintendent comments. Do you have comments?
I do have comments.
Okay.
Ms. Corona, thank you. For the last couple of months, Dr. Micah has brought some good news that's going around the district. And even in the summer months, we still have some good news that we want to share. So first one, Jimmy O'Halligan from Media Production is nominated for a Lone Star Emmy in the sports category for a video he did on a student from Bradley who is working towards the Paralympic Games in 2028. The video can be seen on the district YouTube channel. Yeah, that's right. Northeast ISD is one of just 3 districts across Texas to receive the 2023 Parent and Family Engagement Promising Practice Award from the Texas Education Agency. Regency Place Elementary School Family Specialist Annalisa Barrera earned this honor for her Academic Parent-Teacher Teams initiative and will represent NEISD at the Parent and Family Engagement Statewide Conference in October. NEISD graduate, parent, and volunteer Jennifer Easley was sworn in as the president of Texas PTA in July. Student-to-student groups from Nimitz Middle School and Roosevelt High School traveled to Washington, D.C. in July to represent NEISD in the Military Child Education Coalition Global Summit. Hardy Oak Elementary School, Driscoll Middle School, and Nimitz Middle School were all finalists for the Student-to-Student Team of the Year award this year. Congratulations. And finally, several NEISD high school students wrapped up a paid summer internship with Technology Services. They worked for NEISD in June and July and are certified with either the CompTIA ITF Plus or CompTIA Network Plus or both. For most of them, this is their first job and a great way for students to get to know each other and understand how their school district works. Those are all the comments. Thank you.
Item 10. Item 10, Board Business. A, consider and take possible action on House Bill 3 Good Cause Exception Resolution. That resolution was in your packet. Does anybody have any questions about this? It was discussed in closed session.
Well, there's not really anything we can discuss out here, correct?
Did
Not
you have a
really.
specific question?
No, I think all
Okay.
the questions were answered.
Okay, all right. So do I have a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carried. Item B, possible action regarding use of security personnel. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item C, possible action regarding 2023 TASB delegate and alternate. So this is, every year we bring this and one of us goes as the delegate and one goes in the alternate. Last year, Ms. Landry was the delegate and Ms. Villarreal was the alternate. So I don't know if everyone is planning to go to TASB in the end of September, but do I have someone who would like to nominate themselves to be the delegate?
I'll be going to TASB, and I would be happy to be the delegate. I will also, if someone would like to step up to be the alternate, I will promise to be there if you do need to go to classes as the delegate. So
Okay,
I will make sure that it's that I stay there and that it's covered.
okay. I don't think anybody's going to fight you for it, but I'm just going to ask. Is anybody?
I'll do the alternate.
Okay, all right, perfect. So do I have a motion to recommend Ms. Huey as the voting delegate and Ms. Villarreal as the alternate for the 2023 TASB Delegate Assembly?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Item D, possible action regarding candidate endorsement for TASB Board of Directors Region 20, Position A. This is something else that we see every year where directors come up for renewal, I guess, and they don't necessarily have to be endorsed by other districts, but if it comes to voting, sometimes it's better for them if they do have endorsements. And I do believe that last year, this position A is Rolinda Schmidt, and I do believe that we had recommended her the last time she came up, but.
She was up 3 years ago.
Okay,
and,
3 years.
And
Seems like
we did.
last year.
Yeah, we did endorse last year Robert Westbrook.
Okay.
Who was, I think, I don't know if that's B or C, I can't remember.
Okay,
And I would highly recommend that we endorse Ms. Schmidt. She is on the Kerrville ISD board. She is an amazing leader. She has been an amazing representative for this area. And if things go as sometimes scheduled in the officer rotation, she will be president of TASB next year, and that would be great to have someone from Region 20 being our TASB president.
okay.
So.
And I thought I saw that she was unopposed in this position, is that correct?
Yes. Oh, well, she was, yeah.
Oh, in this
Right.
position A?
Okay.
Yes, her reputation in the area is stellar.
So I think this is more of a formality versus
Yes.
recommending her versus someone
Right,
else.
right. It's a matter of showing our support for her, and I think that would be a great idea.
So do I have a motion to endorse the candidate for the Region 20 Position A on the TASB Board of Directors as submitted?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Landry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't offer Mr. Jimenez the opportunity to speak a minute ago.
Well, I didn't
So-
stop you, so it's not necessarily your
So
fault.
we're going to go back to item B.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to make a very quick statement. First off, board members, thank you very much for your approval of this resolution. Security and safety has always been in the forefront when it comes to our students and our staff. In the spirit of transparency, we are creating a new role of safety specialists at each school, which will fulfill the House Bill 3 requirement, which stipulates all schools have an armed security officer at all schools. Additionally, this will provide yet another layer of safety and security for our students and staff. It will also remove some duties from our employees so they can continue to support our students in their education. Dr. Micah will send out additional information tomorrow morning to the community.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Item E, possible action regarding candidate endorsement for TASB Board of Directors, Region 20, Position B. And this is the, one of the board members from Northside, Carol Harrell. So it's the same thing. Do I have a motion to endorse the candidate for Region 20, Position B on the TASB Board of Directors?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item F, possible action regarding School Health Advisory Council SHAC member appointments. That list has been provided for us. Did anybody, the one thing that was not on there was the Board of Trustee non-voting member, and Mr. Byer had emailed me that he would be interested in doing that.
And Mr. Gray, I emailed through Mrs. Turner, Mrs. Aguilar. I would also be interested in doing it as well. I didn't think to email you directly, but I also volunteered to serve. I know I have room in my schedule this year. Next year, I don't know, but I'd be honored to do it. I know Mr. Byers, similar to me as a parent, and it's near and dear to our heart, probably. I don't want to speak for you, but I would love to serve on there and continue to see the great work and build on that if the opportunity, if y'all agree. Sorry, Mr. Byer, I cut in on you.
Yeah, no, I'd email Ms. Grona, just, it's one of those things, I know it's been in the news and in our minds and at each one of our meetings, and I think I'd like to, Ms. Grona's done a great job representing that, kind of reporting back to us when it needs to happen. And I just thought it would be good for me to try to volunteer for that position as well. One thing I am also on the Safety and Security Committee that I was, should anybody, if everybody's okay with me being on SHAC, that I would like to give that up to somebody to attend those meetings instead of me being on both committees, because we have to have 2 representatives from the board on the Safety and Security Committee as well. So anyway, yeah, I don't know how we, if we have to vote on this or if we have to flip a coin or what, but.
Y'all are going to have to duke it out, I guess.
There, you know, you would get suspended under the code of conduct. You cannot do that, Mrs. Grona. That is not displaying proper decorum.
So when are
Okay.
those meetings?
I'm sorry?
They're at lunch.
They're at lunch on
They're lunch
during lunch,
meetings?
Wednesdays.
And they feed us?
They, oh, wait, with the safety and security?
Yes.
No, they're
Oh,
in the
no,
mornings.
the safety
Oh,
and
they're in the
security is in the
mornings?
They're in the
morning.
mornings.
Oh, that's a deal breaker.
I have not been
I'm just
fed
kidding.
at any one of those meetings.
It's not at 8 a.m. because I usually make
Yeah.
them at 9.
They're usually at 9 o'clock or 9:30, something like that, so. But I know, I mean, like you suggest, I've got flexibility in my schedule to attend at lunch times and that type of thing as well, so. And I know for the foreseeable future, I'll have that ability.
And how often do they meet?
Safety and security?
Yes.
It's 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll volunteer
Well, I think Mr. Byers only
Yeah.
giving that up if he gets on a shack.
Yeah, so,
I'm not sure.
yeah, I'd like to retain one of those two positions, if at all possible, so.
Well, that is a non-voting position, but everyone, other trustees can attend, correct? I
For
mean, that's-
SHAC.
For SHAC,
Correct.
I'm sorry, for SHAC. We're talking two committees there. so-
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is non-voting.
So there's
It
one
just-
board member that is the non-voting member, but then, yeah, any other board.
Is that
member.
part of the discussion, though, or are you, as the non-voting member, are you parts of the discussion, or are you just in
Typically,
attendance?
in the past, I have just been a bystander.
Mm-hmm.
But this year, when they were talking about, was it the bylaws, Ms. Aguilar? There were a lot of questions that the committee members had. And so I explained the process that we went through in the fall to do the bylaws and some back history of why some of the things were in the bylaws the way they were, because they were questioning some of the things. But I would tell you, most meetings, I never said a word. It was only that one meeting, I think, that I ever jumped up and just tried to help explain them through that process.
Yeah, I guess my point in that is I would want someone who was comfortable with not participating in the meetings, because I feel that that is important to let the parents and the committee have their voice without the interpretation or pressure or whatever of a board, of a trustee. Maybe, so if either one of you is comfortable with, I just think that that would be important.
Well, and I guess there's nothing saying that we can't do.
Our
switch-
voice, yeah, I
switch
just felt like our
mid-year if we
voice is
needed to.
here, and we need to
If
be
we-
listening to those
if-
voices, yeah.
If we have the ability to
To share it?
do a fall and spring semester kind of thing, if we're both, if
It's a
we're both.
possibility to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a one-year term in the bylaws, obviously I help ad hoc, and that's how we wrote it to be a one-year rotating term basis. Like I said, I know this year I have the ability, I can't guarantee next year based on outside factors, but this year I know for sure I can, and obviously I was well involved and have been for a long time, and with us getting to BDF and the bylaws, and just want to see the great work continue, and just be, like you say, we're there as a non-voting member, and I recognize that. Just see all the parents, community members in coordination. Obviously the staff's there as well to help facilitate, but I would love to represent and kind of see that growth and that continuous great ideas that they've came up with last year and that growth. So I know it sounds like you as well, Mr. Byer.
Yeah, I mean, after all the work we put into it, I was.
Yep.
To see some of that, especially with the new committee and everything. So.
Well, while y'all are thinking about that, can I ask
Yeah.
another question
Yeah,
about
because
this
I've got
list?
another question too.
Or go ahead, if you have another question, go ahead.
Well, actually, I have a clarification, Ms. Turner, I apologize. On the list, one of my community members is listed as a licensed certified mental health professional. She is not, she should be representing the business community. She works for a mental health organization. She herself is not a licensed professional, so I just want to make sure we don't confuse that.
And then, community member in 6 is listed as a nonprofit health organization, Salvation Army. And my question is, Salvation Army a nonprofit health organization?
I didn't put the nonprofit health organization there. She was just a nonprofit is what it was last year. I'm not sure who put that in there. I just put nonprofit at the Salvation Army. I never said they're a health organization. I'm not sure how that showed up on here.
Okay, well, I think it may be because that was one of the categories in 28.004.
Yeah,
Is it
she was nonprofit last year, and she's still nonprofit, still with the same
Okay.
nonprofit. So it's just nonprofit. That was,
So we do need to change that, though?
Yeah, just
because
say
it's
nonprofit. Yeah,
nonprofit.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, any other comments or question about this?
No?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Did you have it?
Oh, okay. All right, so who wants to make a motion to appoint or approve the list and whose name of the board member is going to be on it?
Do we need to do the board member tonight? Could these two maybe discuss and how they could?
I don't think it has to be done tonight.
Okay.
It
Because-
just have to be done before the next meeting, because
Before
the
the-
23rd is the SHAC meeting, so we have a
23rd,
meeting on
yeah.
the 21st, so we'd have to make a determination.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could approve this list and then bring back that, on the 21st would be the,
Yeah.
Yep.
so we have the term filled for the year.
And technically, we have to have 35 members, and so we've got the 35 members. So, I mean, Shack could begin their work based on this list. But yeah, I mean, if we wanted to approve it without the board member, we can, whatever y'all would like to do.
I think moving forward without approving a trustee would be fine, and then it can be worked out, a decision made between the two.
And the next one we have is the 21st.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so,
That'll work.
so somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
You did. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the member appointments as presented, because right now there's nobody listed on the Board of Trustees. So as presented. So moved, Ms. Villarreal.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Item 11, new business for possible board action. A, internal audit. 1, possible action regarding approval of internal audit plan. Ms. Shoesmith.
Thank you, appreciate it. Good evening, President Grona and fellow board members, executive staff, and guests. Thank you for allowing me to present our new internal audit plan for the coming school year. Feels like yesterday we were here doing that. In addition, I'll be combining this with my quarterly update. We're kind of doing a 2-for-1 this evening in lieu of time, so I'll cover that in the coming slides. A lot of this will be, it's a similar process from year to year. So we have a quick explanation as far as why do we need an audit plan, an overview of how that's developed, the development methodology, as well as how we complete our risk assessment and prioritize the workload of the audit work. Then based on that risk assessment, a list of priority topics is compiled for inclusion in the audit plan, and I'll provide a brief summary of the work that we accomplished last year, and then wrap up with the proposed plan. In both the public and private sectors, occurrences of fraud, theft, waste, and abuse have really tightened requirements for accounting and administrative control processes. The result has been increased emphasis on ensuring that the internal audit function remains independent from management decision-making. This emphasis evolved from a variety of laws, House Bill 1 under Texas Education Code, which places internal audit underneath the auspices and supervision of you, of the Board of Trustees. Additionally, the Comptroller General of the United States, the Government Accounting Office, as well as the Institute of Internal Auditors, both have imposed standards upon internal audit functions, again, to complete this annual plan, which has to be approved by the board. So that plan development takes place in various steps. First off, we do a review of staffing levels throughout the district to determine, throughout the department to determine the total number of audit hours that are available throughout the school year. That is used to estimate the volume of work that the internal audit department can commit to completing. A list of changes in any key personnel being principals, budget managers, our bookkeepers, and paraprofessional staff that deal with money, essentially on our campuses and departments. I gain input from our superintendent, executive staff, as well as many of the executive directors throughout the district. Utilize that input to direct our resources in areas in most need. Also complete a comprehensive risk assessment. This is a 6-step criteria, essentially 6 risk factors that are reviewed to look at all of our different departments and campuses to determine likelihood of fraud, the amount of cash or money transactions in that department or campus, changes in key personnel, things like that. There's a ranking associated with those, and we come up with a score, so that helps us. These are those 6 risk factors. Similar, and they have been used by our department for quite a few years in the same criteria with these same point values. Tends to really help filter up throughout the risk assessment those campuses and departments that have the most need, so we can pinpoint our commitment to those areas. These are ranked essentially the highest. It goes top to bottom, highest level as far as the point value goes. We always add in a little bit of extra time within our workload for unforeseen issues. There are times where, for example, something goes over the hotline, or we have the superintendent or somebody from executive staff, a department that has a very specific need that they ask for help on. It would definitely be more of like an investigative type situation. So we have some extra time allotted in the plan for that. And the emergence of just any type of fraud or theft, when those come up, we have to commit our folks to work on those and possibly pause on a project and then move back. So, looking at a quick glance of last year, these are the audits that my department completed kind of in chronological order throughout the year. Since I last updated you in May, we completed our final 3 projects for the year. You'll see them with the asterisk down on the bottom, and those reports were sent out to you via email. And we have had no new fraud hotline, as far as my normal update that I provide, no new hotline complaints since I last spoke with you in May. And then, of course, no unannounced cash counts because the campuses weren't open for business. So that will be starting up. So we had a little bit of a reprieve from that. If you have questions regarding those 3 final reviews for the year that we haven't had a chance to discuss, I'm happy to do so as we can in open session here at the end of the presentation. And then we'll just take it from there. So in a moment. In general, I'm pleased with our results for the year. We were able to tackle our audit plan in a very succinct and efficient way, so I'm proud of my team. For the coming school year, this slide always indicates the required audits that we do each year. Some of these are for us just as the district as well. A handful of the inventories that we do are also provided to our external auditors as part of our agreement with them. So we kind of do some of their legwork for them, their test work. So that's the standard. You'll see those year after year, those occurring. And I'll say, just so you know, we're already working on the top 2. They're already in action. So knowing that they're required, we went ahead and hit the ground running on July 1st. Pardon me. And then lastly, additional coverage. Campus audits, we had a good significant amount of secondary school principal switch changes. Lots of folks going on to retire and do things that are exciting. And so we have 4 high schools and 4 middle schools to review this year. Our secondary campuses obviously take more of a priority. They have much more money on they clear, a significantly higher level of money through their campuses. So, and one of these is already being conducted currently right now. So we went ahead and got started with that. So I'm committing to do those 8 reviews this year of our campuses. And then under the consultative and advisory services, this was a request from executive staff. I'll say that in a handful of our work that we're looking at this year, audit is going to do the best we can to look at our work through the lens of wasteful spending, or if there's any way we can help earn back, find money towards that deficit essentially. And so one way we're going to do that is to do a utility cost analysis, specifically looking at our after-hours usage of our HVAC systems. There's some good reporting that we can get from that. That's available to us, so we can analyze that and see if there's any, positive changes that we can recommend from that. So that's one. Under the operational and compliance area, looking at our travel expenditures and reimbursements, I have listed their employee. A lot of times, student travel is along with that. It's kind of intermingled with, a lot of trips and things that employees and students go on, but. A good review of travel and expenditures. That's something that our department hasn't looked at for a number of years, and therefore it is on its own, kind of bubbling up the chart. And it's a good place where we can look at spending and see if there's anything we can recommend. And then lastly, our continuous surveillance of our hotline, doing our cash counts when we can at those targeted times. I'm proud to say last year we were able to accomplish reaching 20% of our campuses during the year in those cash counts. So it just keeps our eyes and ears out there and making sure that they know that, audit is out and about. And that is the plan. I'm happy to answer any questions I can about next year's plan or those 3 audits. If there's anything that I can't answer here, I'm happy to.
Does anybody have any questions about the audit plan or the other audits?
I actually did it.
Thank you.
I've got
Yes, sir.
a question. So with the 8 total schools
Sure.
that are, one being audited now apparently, I know that several of those had change in personnel, and I know one of them, I guess, was indicated that the time lapse had been over 5 years, but I know they had a change of personnel within the last few years, and so I was curious, and I got it scored at 10. So I'm wondering, I guess the highest level, meaning
Okay.
that it hadn't been in a while. I was curious at that level, at the high school level, is it because there's so much a volume of money going through some of those schools that's why it might move to the top?
Yes, for
Okay.
sure. You'll see historically, if you were to look back at that risk analysis,
Yeah.
apart from, or I should say, not including any personnel changes, that makes them go up even higher on the list.
Sure.
But take that aside and just truly look at our high schools, every one of them would be at the top of the list. It's millions of dollars that are clearing through.
Going
So
through that.
just from the volume, they just carry the most risk as far as that goes with our campuses. So they just get that higher weight.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else?
I'll say this, Mr. Byer, if it helps. Just to elaborate a little, we do our very best, high schools, to have them on a rotation, even if they don't have key personnel changes. Sometimes we go through a lot of them, and then they're very steady for quite some time. So it's not just a key personnel that will pop them up in there. We will definitely strive to, each year, one at least. It just happens to be quite a few this year, so yeah.
Okay, anything else? Do I have a motion to approve the proposed internal audit plan for the 2023-2024 school year?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Item B, Board Policy 1, possible action regarding Board Policy Update 121. Did you have something to say?
We'll get this.
Okay. That policy was submitted earlier. Did anybody have any questions about any particular policy?
Madam President, I had one policy, FFI. I'm not sure, did you have anything? I didn't want to step on yours. Okay.
I have a couple also.
Okay.
You can go first.
And I had FFI also, so.
Okay. You want to go first, Linda, or?
Yeah,
Ms. Cronin?
and that's fine. So CLB
Do you know what page that was? Sorry.
73.
Okay, thank you.
So the update is to include residential property primarily used as student housing. We don't have student housing, do we?
Where's the expert?
Dr. Mitchell, any of your folks here?
And it's in reference to integrated pest management plan, and they've added, it says, district's IPM program shall govern the district's use of
Okay.
pesticides, et cetera, for controlling pests, rodents, insects, and weeds in and around district facilities, and now we've added including residential property primarily used as student housing. And it's in a couple of different sections, or portions
We
of
don't
that.
have student housing.
My question is, did they mean residential property that borders the school district? Because I know at one of our campuses, we had some portables and there was some rodent problems and a parent contacted it. Is that what the indication is? Because that's not student housing, that's our community and parents, and that's why I don't believe we have student housing, do we?
We don't, yeah, and this says it's intended to apply only to district-owned residential properties primarily used as student housing, so we don't have.
So is there any reason we even have that in there, or should we strike that? Because I know it's a
Well,
recommendation.
this is probably the recommendation from TASB, right?
It is, but it's for the local policy.
Yeah,
Right.
And
so I mean, if we don't have it, I don't see any reason why we have to have that.
I kind
in
of
there.
read that at district facilities would cover us.
Yeah. So can we just strike that then?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
that's throughout, it's in a couple of different spots in CLB local.
Okay. Anything else?
Unless we have plans to create some student dorms somewhere or something
That was
we're
my
not
question.
aware of.
Not at this point.
Did you have anything else, Ms. Landry?
Not on that policy.
Okay.
Another one?
Before that gets stricken, can we maybe check and see what they were intending with that? Because I'm curious as to why that would be included in our local. I don't know if districts that have student housing, is that in case of a potential, like maybe if it's used for emergency sheltering or something like that?
But that would still be just a district facility.
Yeah. I'm just,
What, Mr. Jimenez?
I mean,
what
I
is
noticed
the
it too, and I couldn't figure out,
explanation?
a reason why it would be in there.
So I'm on page 61 with the explanatory notes on the bottom. And so just admin code rules regarding integrated pest management, I think you mentioned that earlier, were amended to include district-owned residential property among the district facilities subject to IPM requirements. And so these changes to the rules add residential property to the buildings and grounds subject to IPM requirements. But
Are we allowed to own residential property as a school district? That was what surprised me in general. Like,
Some districts have purchased residential properties to use as school buildings, so I don't know. I
Yeah, I
knew
mean, I
of
just-
one that had it, but I know they divested of it years ago that did have a residential property.
Is this the first reading, or are we just?
This is first reading.
Okay,
Yeah,
it
so
didn't,
we-
it didn't
that's all we're doing.
stipulate, so that's why I was.
I think we should bring it back, maybe a clarification to
Dr.
either.
Mitchell, is there someone that you can maybe check in with and see if they can answer while we're?
Oh, boarding school.
And I don't think it's gonna have any impact, so I think if we bring it back for a second reading, clarification is probably not gonna, shouldn't impact any day-to-day operations, I don't think, so.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're not missing anything.
Some
Good.
districts are buying residential property, like in West Texas, for teachers.
Oh, that's right.
It's because this specifically says student housing,
Right.
which is.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're including that.
Got it.
In case they turn it over, but some of the teachers, some in the West Texas have bought some facilities, and they're supposed to be for teachers, but we don't know
Sure.
if they'll ever use them for students.
Well, I think if we can just get clarification on that, and when it comes back at the second reading, if there's not a good reason for us to have it, we can just strike it at that point.
This is not showing us first reading.
Right. Well, so,
Yeah, that's why.
right, because I think what we've determined in the past is you don't have to do a first and second reading. So possible action regarding this, but so I think what we could do is if there are policies in here that we want to come back, I think what we can do is approve the update 121 without CLB local.
Thank you. Yeah.
Or without So
Okay.
I think that's, so I'm making a note right here that we want CLB to come back and get some clarification on that.
Yep.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Ms. Landry, did you have others policies?
So the next one is on the FFI also.
Okay, so we'll,
Page 85 of our packet.
okay, Ms. Landry, do you want to go ahead and?
Sure. So on page 82 is what I have.
Oh, 82?
But I printed it before.
What page is it? Is it page 2?
It's one of 3.
Okay, FFI, page 1 of
FFI,
3
one
is
of 3.
84, I think.
Okay.
Okay,
Under the minimum standards, it says the superintendent shall develop administrative procedures. Is that the student code of conduct, or what is that?
So we have our local policy that's developed for under FF5. We also have it in the student code of conduct for bullying, the administrative process for that as well. And that's part of our, what we do for our rollout for our training for administrators as well, as for like the reporting mechanism and also the policy that goes into the investigation portion of it as well.
So there's multiple administrative procedures that go along with this policy?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a way to annotate on the policy what the procedures are, so it's very specific related to the policy?
In our FFI local, there's a step process, there's sections broken out, and then we also have it in with the student code of conduct, but if we need to annotate it differently to identify specifically what the rules are, there's a.
I think maybe the location
No.
of them, such as, when it says administrative procedures, in parentheses, put something like student code of conduct or
Okay.
employee handbook, I think, I don't want to
Right,
speak for you,
whatever-
so that
whatever.
people who read this know where to go to find those specific administrative
So
procedures.
more of a
'cause this-
cross-reference?
A cross-reference,
Okay.
I think is
Exactly.
what you were
Yes,
recommending.
exactly. Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
okay. Anything else on FFI? Ms. Landry?
On page, I guess it'd be 85, the periodic monitoring paragraph, the superintendent shall periodically monitor the reported counts of bullying incidents, and that declines in the count may represent not only improvements in the campus culture because bullying declines, but also declines in the campus culture because of a decline in openness to report incidents. I had to read that like 10 times. It was
That's
very-
one of the, I actually had to recommend a slight change to that because of the way it reads, and it doesn't also define periodically, but I don't know, if you're just, the whole way it reads, this is what I recommended, because periodically is not defined, could be 6 months, 6 years technically, but I just put the superintendent shall monitor the reported counts of bullying incidents at a minimum of once per semester and provide a report to the board thereafter, period. And then declines in the count may represent, because that's more of kind of an evaluative piece, but so that we, as the board, so we have that proper oversight and governance while letting the superintendent do his job. We've defined what that periodic review is. So once a semester, he reviews it, brings it to us, so we have an idea. That way, if we need to adjust policies one way or the other at the board level, we know either everything's working or we can readdress as appropriate without making it burdensome or overly cumbersome like every month or something. I think that may be too much.
Yeah.
Well, or could it be part of that balanced scorecard report, which comes to us
So
annually
we
as
already
opposed
get,
to?
we get one report a year for now.
Right.
At the end of it, we just got it back
Right.
at the end of the semester. So you suggest just adding one more at the end of the fall semester?
Yeah, like at the end of the fall semester, we get an update in January, and then at the end of the spring, we get the annual wrap-up of the year. Because if we need to make a mid-year, if there's a significant thing, we at least have that visibility, and it's incorporated in the district scorecard as well, but at least define it periodically. Because this just leaves this as a written, open-ended, is what I'd recommend.
Mr. Hilliard, People Personnel Services already monitors it, so we can certainly do that once a semester. That's not going to be difficult for us to share that information
Yeah,
with you.
I just wanted to have it written in policy, because that's the way it's clear direction, so everybody knows. Anyone that reads it goes, oh, okay, they're going to do it every 6 months or every year, whatever we think is the best as a board. But that way it's clearly defined, is what I'd recommend. We just add that change, put a period, and then get rid of and that. Because that doesn't read well either, the comma and that kind of, I'm not an English major, but It's kind of a run-on sentence.
Right. And,
Okay.
and maybe reword that last part to clarify. I finally got the indication of what it meant, but reading it doesn't really, to me, clearly say that the decline could be multi-indication of culture or actual decline in bullying. So just kind of clear that, make that a little bit more.
Okay. So rework that paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, so FFI will come back also.
And
Did you have something else about FFI?
Yes, ma'am, I did, unless you,
Okay.
Ms. Landry, I'm sorry.
No, I think that was the big one.
Okay. On page 86 of our packet, the last paragraph where it says access to policy and procedures, in this policy, which the old versions from 2017 says, this policy and any accompanying procedures shall be distributed annually in the employee and student handbooks. So right now, I went back and looked at the student parent handbook for last year, and this policy is not actually administered with it. And obviously, I don't see the employee handbook, but obviously to be in compliance with our policy, it actually, not just reference, but actually sent in either as an index or attachment, but that's how it's written, and it's been written this way for a while. So to ensure that our student code of conduct in the handbooks and the employees is alignment with the board policy, I think we need to ensure that that is done, because I don't believe it's been done. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked at last year's and I didn't see it in there. And this policy says it shall be distributed annually in the handbooks.
Okay. Well, we do have it within, not this specific policy, but we do have parts with regards to bullying and cyberbullying, so we can make sure it matches up in alignment with the policy itself.
Just to make it all, that way people, when they cross-reference it, they know what went. So that, just to make sure we're in alignment. Thank you. That was my point, or my two questions, Mrs. Grona.
Okay. So my question is the notice of report, so it was right underneath that paragraph about the periodic monitoring. It says, when an allegation is reported, the principal shall notify the parent of the alleged victim on or before the third business day after the incident, and then the principal or designee shall notify the parent of the student alleged to have engaged in the conduct within a reasonable amount of time. So my question is, why is one done on or before the third business day and the other is within a reasonable time? Why isn't it the same time period for both?
There's the issue of the investigation. And
Okay.
so when there's sometimes for cyberbullying, there's items of, factual evidence that they need to recover from a phone or they need to get from witnesses and statements. They don't want to interrupt that investigation process. So the victim's parent is made aware in case there's care that needs to happen with the actual student who's the victim. And the one that they're investigating, they need to be able to act on that investigation during that process without interfering it by, if that parent may, decide, well, that child's not going to take their phone to school tomorrow, or they're not going to take, whatever
Okay.
else, or take down social media posts or whatever might be related to the incident.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So what is a reasonable amount of time? I mean, do we need to define that, or is that?
Yes.
So
Or
we have to.
typically, what would you think is, like, if this were an investigation were happening, what do you think a typical reasonable amount of time would be?
So they have 10 days to complete the investigation.
Okay.
And so that would be around the reasonable time. We hope to wrap them up earlier, but they also want to be considerate and take their time and make sure they have all the facts and all the witness statements, likely before or after 10 days.
Okay.
And not too far past 10 days by any means, but as long as it's reasonable within that time frame to ensure that all the pieces of the investigation have been found and considered.
Okay.
Matt, to your point, Mr. Grant, I think we should probably say in a reasonable time, no later than 10 days, kind of what it says in the Student Code of Conduct, unless there's extenuating circumstances and approved by Mr. Jimenez or the superintendent, because there is some due process concerns, and obviously people are being accused and don't even know they're being accused. The parents have a right to know, and the alleged perpetrators do have, at some point, they do have a right to know. So I think a reasonable time, we should kind of put that 10 days, if not sooner, but at least clarified, and then the exception clause if there's extenuating circumstances, but approved at the appropriate level, so that that's just kind of fair, I think, because obviously in the code of conduct, they talk about that process too, making sure everyone gets notified. Because the parent can also help stop the problem as well, if that is actually happening.
Agreed.
Of the eligible there.
Or maybe we could just reference to the code of conduct paragraph in the policy in case that needs to change or changes a future date.
Yeah, that's page 31. We'll get to the code of conduct of that. That's,
If this is coming back to us, could we have staff take a look and
Yes.
Yes, I think
determine
that's a
exactly
good
what
idea,
is a
just-
reasonable time frame? And
Right.
there's so many flexibilities and variations in these investigations. I want to make sure that we're not handicapping staff either.
no, just look at number 1.1.
I have a tendency to really trust staff, and so I don't think that they would deliberately delay notification when it's necessary, when it's needed.
Okay, so,
I'll say in many instances, they're going to jump in and they'll notify the eligibility's parents if there's a safety issue or they have to do stay-away agreements, things like that. Things of, safety concerns, those are going to be addressed right away. Typically, it will only last longer if there's not an immediate safety concern.
Yeah. Well, and I would say on page 32 of the Student Code of Conduct 1.1 talks about 10 business days for the investigation. I think that type of language may be good when it comes back to us to kind of make it match up, is what I would suggest. Number 1 under the 1.1 bullying investigation. Because that reasonable time Mrs. Groner's talking about, I think at least provides some reasonable expectation, but it gives the flexibility in extenuating circumstances.
okay, that's all I had. Does anybody have any other policies that you had questions?
No, I'm good.
I think the reason she keeps saying that is because your light is on, so she thinks.
We have new
The new
microphones,
system.
by the way, because I know a constituent came to me and shared with Dr. Mike, and he said they replaced them all because they couldn't hear us, but now everybody can see when you're lit
Right.
up or not.
So I think that's supposed to be my signal to call on you, but I haven't gotten in that habit, so I apologize. And yes, mine's on. Okay, any other, so do I have a motion to approve update 121 without CLB and FFI?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Landry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Item C, campus administration. 1, possible action regarding school district teaching permit, SDTP for athletic trainers. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Grona. I'd like to ask Shiloh Witten, Executive Director for HR, to address this item.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Jimenez, executive staff, and guests. Tonight, we seek your approval to issue a school district teaching permit to 3 individuals who will be assigned to only teach sports medicine 1, 2, or 3, but do not hold a teacher certificate. We've previously come to you in the last school year to also request this approval. The Texas Education Code authorizes districts through our board to issue a school district teaching permit to a licensed athletic trainer who will teach one of these non-core career and technical education courses. In addition to being licensed, these individuals will have completed the Texas State Athletic Trainers Association, or TSATA, Sports Medicine Instructors Curriculum course and hold the TSATA Sports Medicine Instructor Certificate. The district has reviewed the qualifications for each individual to ensure they also have demonstrated subject matter expertise to include professional work experience and formal training and education. If this recommendation is approved, the district will evaluate our ongoing needs to determine if these individuals will need to seek certification in future years. Before you take action on this item, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I said one question.
Yes.
I believe we ate the same thing last year. Each of these folks, though, are working towards a teacher certification. Is that correct? Is that the intent?
Not for these individuals. So
Okay,
for
so
this,
they're just going to be athletic trainers teaching these courses without the teacher certificate.
correct. Unless we determine at a later time that we do need them to teach any other course, then we would work through that process to obtain that certification within 2 years through an alt-cert program.
Okay, but these are not, that's not the intent with these 3 individuals?
No, that is not the intent.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you.
Ms. Villarreal. Okay, you turned your light on.
I've got, how many do we have in this position, the sports medicine? We have the 3 that we're potentially hiring now? Are there others, or are these the only 3 we have in the district?
So there's 2 per campus as
Okay.
far as the position for athletic trainer. So some do hold a credential in our teaching, but at present, these 3 individuals for these 3 campuses, they did not have the need for them to hold any certification because they'll teach 4 or less periods of sports medicine at the 1, 2, or 3 level, and then their other duties will, of course, encompass the athletic training duties.
Okay. And all 3 of them are at different schools?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So we've sports medicine is at more than just that one
Yes.
school? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the requested school district teaching permits for athletic trainer candidates who do not hold a valid secondary certification, but will be assigned to teach only sports medicine 1, 2, or 3?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Shala.
Thank you.
Item 2, possible action regarding request for TEA homebound instruction waiver.
I'll take this for Mr.
All
Garrett.
right.
So Brenda Oates, our Executive Director for Special Ed, will address this item.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, board members, Mr. Jimenez, executive staff, and guests. The action item before you this evening for consideration is to allow the district to seek permission from the Texas Education Agency to provide homebound services to students who meet the criteria for homebound instruction, however, have a risk of infection due to a compromised immune system. By submitting a waiver, we would be allowed then to provide that homebound instruction through virtual means. We've come to you for the last 3 years with this agenda item and sought your permission, and have averaged about 30 students each year who continue to be confined to their homes for a period of 4 weeks or more for a compromised immune system, which in turn makes it so that we don't want to send staff members into their home for that instruction for the risk that it presents to those students. So we ask you for your permission again tonight to seek these waivers throughout the school year.
Does anybody have any questions? Do I have a motion to approve as submitted the virtual homebound instruction waiver request?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Item 3, possible action regarding concessions. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Grona. Kelly Parker, Executive Director for Athletics, will come address this item.
Madam President, board members, Mr. Jimenez, executive staff, and guests. I'm here to talk about concessions, give you a little background information. Our Northeast Band Parent Association used to run concessions at all of our venues for all of our events. But in 2020, they had a meeting, decided they no longer wanted to do that. So it was taken from fine arts area, given to the athletics department. So when we took it over, there was a position created for a concessions manager within the district who was able to run it. We were lucky enough to hire the man who used to run it for the band parents, and we also were able to have temporary help to help with the deliveries, inventory, and things like that. We thought we were only going to have him a year. We were lucky enough to get him for 3 years. He unfortunately retired this past year. So we put out a job opportunity for people to apply to it, and we've only got like 4 people apply. We interviewed 2 of them. They were not qualified. So we decided to go forward with a bid process to try to find a company that would be able to run our concessions through a contract type way. We had 2 people bid on it, and we've narrowed it down to 1 who would be able to not only run our concessions but also still allow our programs, such as our bands and other programs, to still work the concessions to raise money for their funds. This would help us save money actually for the district because we would no longer need to pay the salary for the concession manager. We would also not need to pay the temporary salary for the temporary help to help do the things that he did. So basically it would be a company that would come in. It's a contract company. They would run the concessions, set it up, do all the inventory, do all the purchasing. They would still use the Coke through through the district because we're on a Coke contract. They will still pay a fee to those who work. On top of that, they will be giving 30% of their net profit back to the district, which we could also take part of that 30% and give back to the programs who work the concessions if we choose to, if you choose so. But it's the best way that we can do this to make sure that we have concessions for our people to come to the games. So we've actually done the bid process. We have the one chosen, but we have not awarded it yet. We're still waiting to see what you think about this and if you want to move forward. So I would like to recommend that the Board of Trustees approve what we're calling the Band Together Agreement for our concession stand.
Coach Parker, what kind of feedback did you get from your
I talked
groups?
to all 5 bands who actually participate and work in the concessions. They're ready to go because they found out there's things that they will not have to do anymore, the things that nobody wants to do in concessions. Now, will they get paid the same as they have in the past? No, they will get paid a little less because this is a company that's going to come in and run it, so they have to have a profit as well. But it's only going to be a minimal loss in fundraising for the groups.
And so they were for it, obviously, right?
Oh, they were for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Not having to set up and tear down and clean up, that's a big plus.
Thank you.
Are there ways for the other organizations? How are we handling that if there's people besides the band groups that want to?
They will, yes. We still have, we have wrestling groups. We have Lee Robotics works our concessions. And this will open it up for other people to work as well. Because they'll be able to use them at the baseball games, softball games, and things like that. The plus in this is they don't have to bring as many people to work the concessions. And that's why a lot of people do not do concessions, because they just can't bring that many people, especially for our football games, playoffs, and things like that.
I guess my question is more, is there a known place where people can go sign up to work shifts? Or how does that work?
Yes, there will be. So the plan is once this is approved and we're ready to go, we're going to have a meeting with the people who will be running the concessions, along with first the 5 bands that participate. And then once we get that taken care of, then we're going to open it up to others on the campuses through announcements and things like that.
Okay. I guess I don't understand why we're going straight to those 5 people first and not opening it up to everybody to ask.
Well, they're our
who
biggest
wants to
participators. I mean, they do the most games that we have, and
Sure.
it's easier for those band parents to get the number of people that we need to run the concessions. A lot of times when we have other people run it, they can't bring in the number of volunteers to work.
Right. Well, I guess, my suggestion would be to open it up to everybody, and if the 5 that can, if they can't bring the people, if you say, here's how many people we need to have,
Yeah.
and an organization can't bring that number of people, well, then they can't necessarily
And that is obviously,
fill it.
that's something we could do.
But I guess I would prefer that if there's a portal or something, that they're able to sign up and say, hey, I need 5 people, and the chess club says, hey, we can provide those 5 people at this baseball game.
Right.
Then they get the opportunity to do that.
Right.
And not necessarily give first choice to 5 organizations that maybe get to then just pick all the concessions. And if they can run it for, the whole year, then that doesn't give anybody else an opportunity to sign up and
Right.
participate. So
Something worth looking at and doing, yes.
It would be good. I personally think it'd be good to look at that for some of the smaller organizations that can't necessarily either haven't thought about it because they don't know about it, or maybe have more people now than they did in the last couple of years.
Right, we can do that.
Question. So obviously back in May, the Reagan Band parent presidents came to me, and I went to Dr. Mike and Mr. Jimenez, and they expressed a big concern because they use that money difference you're talking about to fund scholarships for those students who can't maybe fully participate in all the band activities and trips without the scholarship money. So, and they were concerned that it was a significant difference. So what I'm hearing you say is it's a small difference. When we
Yeah.
talk that, can you give me what you...
The information that they received at that time was totally way off base.
Okay.
So when I talked to them, I explained to them. What I did was I took last year's numbers, and I said, okay, what if we were doing what we're planning on doing this year last year? What would happen? They would have made about 70 to 80% of what they made last year, doing it this way. But it also comes down to how many people come to games, and how many they decide to work, things like that. And we're going to make some changes that hopefully is going to improve the sales at the concession stands.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure, because I know that was, they were a very large band, and they were
And I
very,
understand.
very, very concerned, as Mr. Hennes knows. I want to just make sure that it was addressed, because that
It
they
was.
rely on those. From what they told me and
Yes.
shared with them, they rely on those funds. That makes the difference for them to be able to get every
True.
kid to participate in band that may otherwise not have to.
And I was very transparent with all of them when I
Okay.
talked to them.
Fair enough. That answers my questions. Thank you.
I have a question. Who's going to be the oversight to, look at the books to make sure that the correct amount of money is being given back?
Myself and my staff accountant,
Okay.
yes.
And most importantly, don't mess with the pretzels on the BAC West soccer field.
Well, there will be
Those are
some
of the
changes.
best
There will be
pretzels
some.
in-
There will actually be some additions and things. We still have oversight of what's being sold. We still have oversight of the cost and things like that. So we're not just completely turning everything over to them. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Do I have a motion to approve the Band Together agreement as presented?
So moved. Oh.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
Second. Mr. Byers.
Mr. Hilliard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you.
Kelly. Item 4, possible action regarding 2023-2024 Student Code of Conduct. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Grona. Tyler Shoesmith is on his way back up to discuss this agenda item.
Good evening again. So the Student Code of Conduct, if you've noticed, has undergone a significant facelift over the last, format and basically the manner in which it's presented. Coming into this role, I've had the opportunity to have some fresh perspective and some fresh eyes on it, and wanted to look at the organization and the tone. And after consulting with my leadership and reviewing several of the large school districts in Texas, Dallas, SAISD, Cy-Fair, Round Rock, and also TASB's model Student Code of Conduct, I reorganized the presentation of the information in there to provide a little more progressive flow and some clarity so that our community has greater transparency as to the read of the actual document. Just knowing that, having come in and taken a look at the way it was formatted, I just wanted to make sure it was a little less confusing. It was more streamlined and kind of a step process. The Student Code of Conduct, with regards to the update from the 88th legislation, we have a little bit of substantive change with regards to House Bill 114, which is reflected in the updates in the Student Code of Conduct. And with that, there are no other substantive changes to the actual Student Code of Conduct except for its look and its flow. But that was the major change that came out of the legislation this year. And I'll be happy to take any questions, and I'd like to ask for your approval for the Student Code of Conduct for the next coming school year.
I have a question. I was going through this, and I'm confused, actually, because during the, your categories of, offenses, it seems like in your standard code of conduct, there's really no difference between, let's see, under the, the discipline, let's see, categories and offensive, like your category 1 offenses lists engages in conduct indecency with a child, aggravated kidnapping, manslaughter, criminality, or criminally negligent homicide or aggravated robbery. Okay, that's category 1 offenses. I can certainly see where that would be a category 1 offense. But then you go over to your category 2 offenses, and you pretty much have the same the verbiage. So I'm trying to, who is it that determines if you have a category 1 or category 2 if you basically have the same thing, happening? And another thing I'm concerned about, now I'm sorry, I'm throwing these out at you, but it talks about how, we're looking at, violating dress code. Well, I see people violating dress code all the time, and nobody's following this. So I'm trying to figure out why it's even in here if we're not going to enforce it anyway. And also on page 13, students shall be treated fairly and equitably. I hate that word. That's a race to the bottom. Equally. It's kind of like a word, a salad on that deal. It should be equally, not equitably, because everybody should be treated equally. But I just don't understand why we have category 1 offenses, we have category 2 offenses, and then we go back here, and it's like the same language over and over again. I was wondering why.
So I can address the first question first. Let's kind of break them down a little bit. So you have category 1 offenses. Those are mandatory expulsions. And so those are broken up to categories as to what the outcome of the actual offense would be. So in the category 1, it may look familiar to like category 2, category 3, not usually 3, but like 1 and 2 may look like. It really comes down to the actual act itself. So when you look at the mandatory expulsion, if you look at number 3 under 1.1, you have engages aggravated assault, aggravated sexual assault. So you have those those specific ones where you have those as mandatory expulsions. And when you go to category 2, you don't have that same type of language here except for where it took place. If it's off campus, like if it's a Title V felony, it's off campus somewhere. It wasn't even involving the school business. And so you have a differentiation as to where the conduct took place and whether or not the school district, when we do take action, that situational part of it is important as to what the outcome is going to be. If it took place on campus versus it took place 300 feet or other, then there's going to be a difference with regards to the category offense outcome.
Okay, if somebody commits this sort of criminal activity, whether it be on campus or off campus, isn't it a threat to our children if that child is allowed to participate in school? If they're capable of doing that, isn't that a threat?
So that's the way the Texas Education Code reads. It allows us to take some action for activities that do take place outside the school environment. So we're still able to do placements in discretionary alternative education programs or JJEP based on, that's where you see the differentiation, but overall, we are still able to take action for the safety of children.
So, Ms. Ferriel, like for category 1, and again, these, like Mr. Shoesmith said, they come from the Texas Education Code, so we didn't write these up. These are coming straight from the code. And the first one, it's a mandatory expulsion, so students shall be expelled for these offenses. For category 2, they may be expelled, but definitely shall be placed in DAEP, in the Alternative Center. So it just differentiates, again, based on that, but they're similar mostly, except for where it occurred, and for instance, one of them talks about the elements of assault versus one saying it's an assault. So there's some deviations there that determine that.
Okay, so who determines the elements of assault? I mean, okay, for example, you have certain, I guess, I'm assuming certain degrees of assault. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
And many times it's something that administration works alongside. If it's a criminal issue with our Northeast Police Department that understands when laws are broken, that they can assist us with those degrees of what occurs because of bodily injury or whatnot, specifically for an assault, a physical assault.
Okay. I was just confused. I'm looking at the same language over
Right.
and over again.
No, it can be because it's like you have a different parse out and it says 300 feet or within 300 feet. And it's like, didn't I just read that in the last paragraph? I totally understand that.
Okay.
You good?
We're good. We're good. Sorry.
Mr. Shoesmith, first, thank you for the formatting update. It definitely is much more, I'll call it, readable and clear. So thank you for doing that. You talked earlier about the tone, and we're kind of resetting the tone. Here's one thing, I sent this to Dr. Micah last week. I'm not sure if you got it. I'm assuming you probably did. But my concern is starting on page 15 through page 29 is all the category 1 through 3 offenses, DAEP. That's the most severe stuff. Well, it's important. But for the tone and what I think for consideration, I'm not sure it's going to get done because I know we need to get this approved, but maybe for next year's, that stuff's kind of at the high end of the discipline scale versus all the other stuff that applies, much more stuff, the bullying, drug-free schools, hazing, internet, all that stuff that really, as parents and students are reading this, that, it applies to everybody in progressive, but to put like, here's the, I call it the slam worst case, to me, that doesn't set the right tone. And quite frankly, I think a lot of people might go, I'm reading the same thing almost over and over again and not get to all the other stuff that's very important from bullying, all the other stuff starting on page 31. So consideration to maybe reflow it, not, the information's all fine, but reflow that so that the people that are reading it read it kind of with that understanding. And then, by the way, if you get down to here and you're in these category fences, serious deal, because that is, but how many DAEP placements did we have last year out of our 57,000 students? Ballpark.
I have the number for you.
The exact number, I'm not surprised, but.
So last year we had 1,629.
Okay, out of 60,000, right?
And those are either mandatory or discretionary, right? Because some could have been category.
DAP, yes, sir.
Certain, or maybe just put in there any DAP references, see the end or the appendix, whatever, because to me, that's just heavy, and a lot of the other good stuff in here won't get read, because they're going to go, that's 15 pages, and human nature is going to go.
Sort of a least severe to most severe.
Yeah, kind
instead
of
of the other way
alphabetical
around.
is
Sure.
what it's kind of in. That's just something to consider, because I don't want this good information that everyone's responsible for and the students get missed. So for consideration.
So, Mr. Hilliard, may I just to make sure I understand this? So it's almost like the cascade going from category 4 down to category 1 instead of the other way around.
Correct. And all the day-to-day stuff that most kids are likely to go, oh yeah, the smaller, less severe stuff.
Okay.
That applies to everybody. And then if you make poor decisions, then it gets ratcheted up. But otherwise, I think it gets lost when students and parents are reading this. Personal opinion. That was what I suggested last week. And the other question, page 21 and 23, there's two statements in here in the box that say, any DAP decision of the Board of Trustees or the board's designee, which I believe you're technically, as the head of pupil services, you're kind of the person who makes the DAP.
Yes, sir.
But we have not made, since I've been on the board, have we made a DAP decision? 'Cause is this legal that it says the Board of Trustees? Because otherwise I think it should be stricken. Is that illegal?
It matches language as TEC code.
Okay,
And
so
I did have the opportunity to talk to Mr. Lopez about that
Okay.
based on that question. And he said historically the board has never designated, say we're designating this individual, but the job role itself has been the designation as a person.
Right, and I saw you put your name and office title in there. People may think we, the board, are doing these decision makings when we aren't. So I want to be very clear on roles and responsibility. But that's in the law and that's what it says. That's fine. That's stuff that we have not done since I've been on the board. And so I just want to get clarification on that.
Yes, sir.
So that's legal language.
Yes, sir.
That's in there. Okay, thank
Well,
you.
Because it's in here, does that mean that we are going to be responsible for this from now on? Because it's in here?
Or it's an or.
It
So
says-
it's an or. So normally we
Board's
don't.
designee.
Okay.
But that's the law. That's why I wanted clarification on the legal piece of it, because I didn't have a chance to look up Chapter 37. So, thank you, Mr. Shumis. Next, Ms. Cronin, those are my questions. Green light off.
Anybody else have any questions about that?
Sorry. Back to dress code. Okay, are we actually going to enforce that this year? It's in here.
thing?
Seriously, are we going to address it, and make kids actually wear clothes that are on their bodies? Are we going to be doing this?
What page is that on?
It's right here. I mean, I'm sorry to be rude, but it's on page 12. It's halfway down. I highlighted it. If you go down here, violating the dress code. Are we actually going to enforce the dress code this year? Make my heart happy and say yes.
Mr. Barrett, it's about 2/3 of the way down.
Got it.
So, Ms. Virial, the intention is always to enforce any rule that's there. That's separate from the code of conduct in the sense that if there's not enforcement of it, then we need to deal with whatever school or administrators, and work with them through that. But in terms of it being in the student code of conduct, we believe that that's something that we all want to see. Working through enforcement is another piece that we'll have to work through if it's not happening in certain places.
Doesn't each campus is in control of their own?
To a degree.
To a degree.
Typically, we have some parameters, and then from there, the campuses can, sometimes in some cases, some campuses may be stricter. For instance, we have some schools that have a modified uniform, per se, wearing a certain, back when I was in Eisenhower Middle School, we had our kids that wore collared shirts and khaki pants, or a spirit shirt. When, I went in asking parents, is this something that we want to do? Overwhelmingly, they said, we don't want this to go away. So that was just the culture of that school, that they wanted to continue with this. Other schools may be a little bit different. So to your point, Mr. Byer, there are some variations, but in terms of certain things that kids cannot wear or should not wear, those are rules for everybody. For instance, references to gang-related drugs, that type of thing, kids are not supposed to wear anything of that nature. And that's just a simple example.
Well, you brought up a very good point. You offered to have that uniform, that modified uniform, go away, and the parents said no. What I'd like to know, and I, maybe hopefully, members of our communities will, step up and say, hey, we would like to see this, because it would be really amazing to actually have an actual enforceable dress code that is district-wide. And, I think that essentially we need to become a little bit more uniform in how we handle things, so that if, somebody shows up at a school campus, they can look at the campus and say, yes, everybody's appropriately dressed. And
I think you need to give some autonomy to the campuses, though, because I mean, there's a big district, and my kids went to a school that had a uniform, and then sometimes they got to wear spirit shirts and stuff like that. But as long as those kids are learning, and the administration and the teachers in that community are okay with what those kids are learning, they all have their limits, and they do the best they can to enforce all that. And I think rolling out a district-wide, uniform policy would be a disaster.
Well, not uniform policy, I'm just saying enforce
and there are standards, and
dress code.
And those administrators do what they can to enforce the dress code where it's applicable. Sometimes trying to enforce the dress code becomes more of a distraction than the uniform or the clothes that person's wearing. And so they're having to make judgment calls every day, and I think, trying to mandate that a consistent one across the board without giving some kind of autonomy to our campuses and the administration at the campuses is probably the wrong way to go. That's the people I've talked to, and especially if you want to get students involved, you could have a very healthy discussion with parents and students all in a community meeting, and they would let you know exactly what they think about all that. So it's an option. You could go out and talk to your community and invite the students, invite the parents, and see where it goes.
Well, this is true. I think our parents, at least in my community, from what I've seen, I think they have a very healthy respect, and I think that it would help if, the dress code. It was when I went to school, the dress code was enforced. They would send you home if you wore a sundress without 2-inch straps, this sort of thing. So I mean, it's basic.
And I think the key there between the discussion is really about getting feedback, right, from our parents, from our students, from everyone there. And I know our principals work hard to get as much feedback as they can when they're building their, dress code and following the parameters, but something that we can always work harder at. So we can certainly continue to push that with our principals. And again, like I said, they're doing it. They are speaking to their parents, but maybe finding a way to be a little bit more, capturing more parents. I guess that's the biggest thing, capturing more to get some more input. But again, we can't leave the student voice out of that, right? Especially when we look at our balanced scorecard, we want to make sure that our employees, our students, our parents also get the opportunity to give some feedback.
Oh,
so thank you for that.
I agree 100%. I'd just like to, get some parents involved. So maybe there might be a parent or two that's listening to this that might actually want to step up and get involved. So, but anyway.
We will be putting out information about our dress code committee that goes out every other year. This is our second year, so we will be instituting that this year. So I'll make sure that you have that information. If you want to provide it to your community, they can provide input to us.
Well, and it is something that we've talked to the student voice students about, is dress code. So we've asked them on then they provide a lot of information.
Do we have one of those surveys recently, or any information from the last one?
I took notes, and I think Mr. Jarrett did as well. I mean, I can try and find those notes that I took. Okay, anything else about this?
I have one. I actually have two things. One concern on page 10, where it talks about the interview of the students regarding the students' conduct or conduct of other students without notice to parents, guardians, or the consent of parents or guardians. Does that happen with multiple interviewers, or is that, are there any guidelines? I'm concerned about the liability of allegations.
So are you talking about a general student investigation, and is there like one adult, one student in a room, or two adults in a room and one student? Is that
Right,
what you're
right.
asking? Typically, those investigations have you'll have more than one individual who's an adult in the room doing those investigations. Sometimes it's a police officer, sometimes it's an administrator, sometimes two administrators, sometimes it could be a single, but they're all very much aware of what the investigation process looks like and what the situational awareness is with regards to that child being in a room with them while they're conducting an investigation.
And so is that a requirement to have a witness with the interviewer?
A witness with the interview. Usually it's
Like
more
multiple
fact finding,
adults or-
so I don't believe it's a requirement to have a second person in the room while they're interviewing or asking a student questions. Just by personnel-wise, it probably is prohibitive. They just don't have enough people to be able to do it that way, especially in a large, comprehensive high school.
Yeah, I think this specific area is under the section under campus behavior coordinator. And so I don't know if there's a different, it basically says, yeah, they're allowed to interview students without prior notice to parents, guardians.
I would think that may open us up to some liability.
You made me
Especially
think, if we're going to say we have the legal authority, I would say right after that, it needs to be referenced, because you can get into the constitutional First Amendment right, due process. We can go down that whole road. But when you're now talking to a minor who technically doesn't have the ability to give consent without a parent, we could find ourselves in a lawsuit if somebody didn't like that. So if there's the legal authority, I think right after that, we need to clearly identify it, the authority that authorizes the CBC or the designee to do such an action without notifying the parent or guardian who is the responsible consenting party for a minor child. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Because
We can also discuss this with our attorney just to make sure that we have some language that makes maybe better sense. If it's clear, for sure, we can definitely look into
Yeah,
that.
just to protect
Yep.
us. Okay. And then the other thing I had was just kind of nitpicky, but on page 20, marijuana was spelled with an H, and I don't know if that's a new drug or...
So I've seen this since years when I was in law enforcement. You see one text that says marijuana with a J and it's spelled with an HJ or with an H. And the way the law reads with regards to the update that came out from House Bill 114, marijuana is with an H. No J, no JH. So
Interesting. Well, in other places within the...
it cycles in
yeah,
and out. So we try to match up the language exactly how the law is written, so that way we reflect exactly what is stated. So that's why you see the H and sometimes it's a J. But we want to make sure we're directly in line with that.
And many times in law, when you see something coming straight from law, it was codified back in the 30s as an H.
So
But,
like carrying a banana to church on Sunday?
yeah, but
That's created
it's
by
also
power.
written with a J. But it's the same thing. Either one's acceptable.
Oh, okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the 2023-2024 Student Code of Conduct as presented? Oh, with what? I didn't make that notation. With the changes that were discussed?
What was that one?
This one was under CBC, just looking at that legal piece.
Oh.
That were covered, I just want to make sure.
Will we get it back to review, or we just approve it with?
So we can bring it back to review. The thing is that as school is starting, we want to make sure we have a student code of conduct. But we can certainly review the language. I'm sorry. We could certainly review the language that we've brought back at some point, but if we can approve the majority of this and then those little pieces that we can bring back to you, if you all are okay with that, because I would hate to start the school without having a document.
No, I agree. We absolutely need that.
Well, and is this is living document the right? So
Can
that
be.
changes can be made, it doesn't have to,
It just needs to be approved each year. It can be adjusted during the year.
but I mean, you could bring it back and we could say this needs to be adjusted.
Or adding the amended language to that one spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can approve it, and then if we need to bring it back for changes, we can do that.
Right. The major categories of offenses, like those things, aren't going to change because that's straight out of
Right,
law,
yeah.
right? So it's just some of these minor things that we may need to look at.
Okay,
That's okay.
so do I have a motion to approve it as discussed and then bring back changes as needed?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Tyler. Item D, Business Services 1, possible action regarding purchase of attendance credits. Mr. Villarreal.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Jimenez, executive staff, and guests. We bring to you tonight a resolution, or not a resolution, a precise verbiage that we need to approve these purchase of attendance credits. Even though we're not going to buy any, the state says we have to approve this in case we were to go above that tax rate, and we are not. So we're not, we do this every year. We have to bring to y'all this item to purchase attendance credits, even though we're not buying any.
Right. Questions for anybody? Okay, so can I just read the recommendation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the delegation of authority to the superintendent to obligate the district under Texas Education Code, Chapter 49, and include the above referenced language in the minutes of this meeting for provisions to the TEA?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 2, possible action regarding health and dental insurance premiums. Mr. Villarreal.
Oh, yes, ma'am. We bring to you tonight, hopefully approval of our health insurance and our dental premium rates. We discussed this in our budget study session back in June.
Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the attached employee premiums and district contributions for the 2024 plan year?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item E, consent. 1, business services. A, certified appraisal roll. B, waiver of penalties and interest. C, interlocal agreement. D, bid items. E, 50,000 purchases. 2, operations. A, professional service contracts, construction contracts, and related contract amendments supporting the 2015 bond, M&O, and ESSER 3 program funds, design, and construction requirements. 3, minutes from June and July 2023. 4, end of consent. Do I have a board member wishing to pull an item from consent?
Can we pull interlocal agreement?
That was the same one I was going to request. Thanks.
1C. Okay, anything else? All right, do I have a motion to approve consent without E1C?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. All right, item E1C, Ms. Landry.
So just for clarification, it's not real clear on the consent item exactly what services we're purchasing from UT Health Science Center.
Good evening again. So the interlocal agreement is, I had to learn out exactly what it was when we were looking into the project we're putting on. So I've presented to you on the mental health grant with Bexar County, and we were in the process of identifying a third-party vendor for our mental health services. And we currently have a support program with TCHAT, Texas Child Health Accessing Through Telemedicine. And so one of the conversations I had with one of the, Dr. Plitzka, who's the head of psychiatry for UT Health Science Center, they then said, hey, have you ever thought about, we were looking at piloting an after-hours weekend program for the mental health as well. Would you consider us to bring an MOU to you and maybe use us as a third party? And so we didn't even think that was going to be on the table because they're providing mental health services for the full state of Texas. And so through that conversation, we were developing an MOU that will come later to be able to possibly utilize them as our third-party mental health provider that would be supporting the mental health grant. But what they've done on top of what other agencies or organizations that we're looking at is they're providing matching dollars to us. So what we were going to be able to afford was 3 FTEs for additional counseling support. They're giving us another $190,000 to provide more, 1.7 FTEs in addition to like a higher criteria of vetting these individuals who will be serving our kiddos. So it's like this T-Chat folks that we know and love. In addition to that, these are folks that are at a higher pay grade because they're going to be working nights and weekends. And so the interlocal agreement kind of sprung out of that. This one was a little faster to get done and taken care of first, and then the MOU is going to come later for approval. Long story to get to a finer point. But
No, thank you for that excellent.
Yes,
Does that
thank you.
answer?
Are you?
Yeah, I've got a couple more, but if you're, I don't want to.
I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else? I don't want to, okay. That was the first question I had, is what are we specifically getting from UT Health? The next thing is, what are we, the district, projecting to save versus a direct contract? Because it says we're going to have cost savings by doing this. So what are we projecting on the scope of savings? Because obviously we're 35 million or plus more.
Right, so we haven't really we haven't done that analysis.
Okay, so we don't know.
Right, so basically, along with this new partnership, it also opens up the district to be able to use the contracts that UT Health Science goes out for bid for. So it's given us a larger pool of vendors.
Okay.
And that's all that it is. It's just an additional benefit for us on top of just doing the regular MOU with them.
Okay, so I got a couple more. I got like five more
yeah,
questions.
go
So I'm just, I think you may be the one answering them. Thank you. Do we currently have an interlocal agreement with UT Health, or is this brand new? This is the first time?
This is brand new.
Okay, because I didn't remember seeing it. So this is, okay, so this is brand new.
Right, and the reason I brought this up is because it's in our FASRAG through TEA. It's in the purchasing module where it's advised that we do a formal agreement whenever we're going to spend over $50,000 with an entity.
Yeah, no, it's good. We need to know, because obviously Mr. Shoesmith just brought this up, but obviously this ties to mental health and the grant for the students and the staff as well. But that still has to run through the SHAC for approval. So, because I got some more questions here, which I was surprised to see this already, quite frankly. If we use UT Health for this T-Chat program, will they bill the parents directly, or are they going to go through Medicaid?
That I'm not too sure.
There's no billing in this process.
So flat rate contact, we pay for its service, and then they take care of the vendor on the backside?
So we will provide them a set amount of dollars to T-Chat, and then they're going to provide the service providers to us, just in the same sense. So it's still going to be free for parents and family, and also we're going to be able to include families in this, because previously before, with regular T-Chat, they're not able to utilize, families on their own can't utilize it, so, but it's not billed. There's no billing on our part. We're just
billing?
using them as a third-party vendor.
Okay. So what mechanism is in place to ensure we, especially student private data, but it's all HIPAA related because we're talking mental health.
That's correct.
So what mechanism, because this interlocal is almost so generic and nebulous, quite frankly, in my personal opinion, as to it, Section 4 is my primary concern, which I'll get to in a minute, but so what are we doing as a district to ensure, if we're using UT and a third-party vendor, that we have control of this process and the proper controls are in place?
So these are two separate functions. They're kind of piggybacking. I'll let Valerie describe it a little bit better than I can, because I'm relatively new to the interlocal agreement. But they're just, since we're in partnership, we'll possibly in the future with them, with the MOU, allows them to piggyback on their purchasing. That's what this agreement is. Our part, that's a whole separate thing with T-Chat and the agreements we currently have in place with them. We already have an MOU with them with regards to just the services they're providing to our kids already.
Okay, because reading Section 4 talks about first party, second party, then second party can go to the vendor, and then the vendor, they can determine the quality of the items and that. So it sounds as though the district, i.e. the board, would be giving away our authority to monitor this program if we just give them the cash. Is that?
Right, so no, this is totally separate.
So
Tyler has his section where he's doing the contract for the mental health section.
Okay.
And I kind of questioned this too, because I ran our interlocal agreement through our attorney and said, I was concerned about information that was posted in item section 3 and 4. And I didn't think it really pertained to this particular contract. But this is just standard language that they put in for any local agreement where you're sharing cooperative purchasing.
Okay.
Where we're sharing vendors.
Is there any reason we don't identify like Northeast as the first purchasing party? Because I had to read this multiple times to try and make sure I'm understanding who's the first purchasing party and second purchasing party. Because this language, it may be boilerplate, but this is local Northeast. We need to be very clear. I'll just put our name and UT Health in there, because this Section 4 concerns me a lot.
Right. I can take it back to our attorney, and we can have a look at it.
I would really like to do that, especially because we're not going to be able to do this program.
Mhm.
And that was what I was going to request, is that we postpone this item to the next board meeting where we can get that, because like I said, it's very generic and nebulous, and we need to have maybe a better understanding of how this is going to overlap with the possible mental health program coming forward, because obviously these
Correct.
are important services.
Right.
We just need to be very clear that we're protecting our student, teacher, and staff data, and that we have the ability to monitor it to make sure we're getting good value for what we are purchasing.
Right, and I was wondering if maybe that would come through in an MOU.
Okay, maybe it is, but maybe
specific.
we need to see them side by side, or what we are proposing at least, so
Okay.
that it makes sense, and then some clarity on this is what I would like, because right now I can't explain this to any of my constituents.
Okay.
That's what my concern is. I have no way to say we're going to do something with UT Health tied to TChat is all I can say. And
Okay.
I think we need to maybe
That's
be able to
understandable.
explain it better to the community if we're spending these resources, from my personal opinion and perspective. So I don't have any other questions. I'm not sure if any other trustee does. But if not, I was going to move to have this item postponed until the next meeting on the 21st or 20th as appropriate for further discussion. Since it is like we're in a rush to necessarily do this, correct?
Yeah, let's say, is there any timeline,
Do we have a
timeframe that
timeline?
this?
I don't, the interlocal agreement, I understand, is a best practice. It's not a timeline constraint for us to be able to move forward. If we have an MOU, we want to bring it for approval, so.
Right. And we're just doing it as a formality.
Okay. Yeah,
And
if we,
it's not it's not required, but it's advised.
but it doesn't cut off any services right now or anything
No.
else. So as Mr. Byers, if we can bring it
Mhm.
back, that would be my
better
motion, so that we
language.
can have a better understanding with a little bit more clarity.
Okay, I can take that back to our attorney.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, I move to postpone that item to the appropriate time. Staff's ready to bring it back on an agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 12, reports. A, interim financial and management reports. B, federal grants report. C, awarded bid report. D, fourth quarter investment report. E, open records request report. Those have all been provided for you. Item 13, discussion and possible action regarding board members' request for items to be placed on a future agenda and our request for reports from the administration. Is there anything? Seeing none.
I have one,
sorry.
I'm sorry. I wasn't fast enough, I apologize.
I'm sorry?
I wasn't fast enough getting
Oh.
to my button. For the topic of chaplains in school, can we add that to a future agenda or to the next agenda?
If you get a second.
Second that.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right. I think the motion carried. I said aye. And y'all said nay. Okay, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2. Item 14, adjournment, and the time is 8:45.